presenters. There are lots and lots and lots of matters of detail which are yet to be resolved. By all means, touch on those, but don't have too great an expectation that we have all the detailed answers to your questions. But at this point, I would hand over and invite you to ask questions of any individual member of the presenting group here, or of the group, and they can sort out who answers it. Okay, I have one straight away up here.
Yes, you've made great statement of pedestrianisation of the town centre, something which I entirely support. The question really is pedestrian access to the town from the west of the town, which seems to be sealed off by that new north-south road. That access was greatly improved, by the way, by the filling in of the Debenham subway, which was not a nice place to use at night.
The east-west crossings over the river from the town will be greatly improved to the station. I think the inclusion of, I think it's termed a kiss and drop, but a courtyard on the west side of the station should make that a much more pleasant route across. In an earlier iteration, the Solent scheme had a public right-of-way alongside the station, and we would hope that in any development they retain that. In terms of walking from, say, the Mount, there will have to be some crossings, as there are today. And I think that the detail we need to drill into and take reference to everybody's comments. So rather than dealing with that now, it can be solved.
Leave the car at home. Take the bus. Take the traffic out. Wonderful. At the moment, I take a very handicapped old lady on the basis of her blue badge to that little part of North Street where she can pop into M&S and even Barclays without me getting clobbered for parking on a double yellow line. How far does this arthritic biddy have to walk under your vision before she can get to Marks and Sparks?
I haven't got the answer for you. You've got to put into context that we are pleading of the council to do the exercise, do the master planning exercise. We are not presenting you a finished plan here, but everybody is mindful of the needs of the elderly, and particularly as we're in a very hilly and difficult town for shopping. So I haven't got the answer for you. The exercise hasn't been done yet. I can't answer you detailed questions on the buses, but the buses are hugely important too. I can't answer you detailed questions on where people who park their cars, will that be changed? But you start with a vision, and you start saying, what are the basic fundamental qualities of towns that people enjoy visiting? And generally, it's getting the heavy goods vehicles out, getting the weight of through traffic out of the town centre, opening up Riverside. Now, I quite agree with you. I haven't got the answer for your question, but we're at a start of a journey, not at a finish. If we can persuade the council to take on this work, then I would hope, say, in a year or 2 years' time, you can ask me the question, I'll tell you exactly.
The streets that would become pedestrianised would in fact be shared streets. They would be shared streets with buses and taxis, and I see absolutely no reason why a number of parking spaces for disabled shouldn't also be allowed to use those shared streets.
Thank you very much. May I say how much I welcome your vision? I do think that the leadership of the council is to be congratulated for appointing a practice of the calibre of allies to look at this. The one question I have is, when I look at other examples of successful urban regeneration in cities like London, they've largely been founded on the fact that there is a single landlord, a single owner of all the land in question. I think the biggest challenge you're going to have here in Guildford is the fragmented nature of the ownership of all the sites you're talking about. And I just wonder whether you've thought about this, and perhaps allies can comment on this, where they've come across it before, how you're actually going to get this vision achieved in practice.
You're absolutely right. We have, I think, along Walnut Tree Close, there are 15 different owners. And in the town centre, we're blessed that the council own a lot of the big sites. So that's a great start. There are a number of challenges, not just that one, in Guildford, being a gap town and being so crammed in with the railway, the river and the roads. The point I've been making to council members and officers is that there is no easy answer to these questions. They've got to really be very bold. And bold probably means compulsory purchase order. It means some of the larger developer partners who've got the vision and the longevity to see it through. We already have two very good development partners in the town who are gearing up to do the North Street scheme, which is Land Securities and M&G, the old Prudential. And it is far more difficult than developing a greenfield site. I absolutely agree. On the other hand, you start with the first step on the journey. And I have been, one of my projects has been the Westfield London scheme, where for 20, possibly 30 years, most of that land had lain derelict or low-value industrial. And every British institution, every British developer turned it down and said it couldn't be delivered. There were 9 separate rail projects. Well, Chelsfield made a start on it, and I persuaded a German fund to put up 1.3 billion to deliver it. And then Westfield, the Australians, who've got a very much a can-do approach, they've done Westfield London, they've done Westfield Stratford, they're now taking on Croydon, which has got far more property interests that have to be acquired to make it happen. I absolutely agree. It's difficult, but if you don't try, and that's my only answer.
That's a very good question. Actually, what is important is that in Guildford, the council do own a very significant proportion of the town centre. It's unusual and it's a great opportunity. In terms of the normal sequence of events, one would have to go through a process of land assembly, amalgamating sites, appointing through a competitive process developers and others to take those on and achieve the best scheme for the community and for the local authority. And we feel very confident that the lessons that one can learn from, you were referring to some of the, King's Cross or etc., some of the schemes where there is a single landowner, but the lessons will be the same and the experience can be drawn from those. So we feel very confident. And can I just raise the point about that you raised, just in relation to parking? It's critical that as the plan develops, that people with mobility issues have to be able to drive in and park. There's no question of that.
Graham Hibbert, I think the Vision Group deserves congratulations for having pursued the idea of a master plan for the town, and the council for listening and carrying it out. As John said, we set off without having had a lot of development for a long time. This, or something like it, undoubtedly needs to be done. The question is this all that needs to be done? One of the things that troubles me, and I think many residents, is that one of the big problems in Guildford is through traffic, down the A3 and going through the centre of town. Would the Vision Group agree that this plan really doesn't do anything to address the issue of through traffic, and that there is a risk that unless this is combined with some sort of solution for the A3 and some sort of solution to get rid of other through traffic, firstly, it won't achieve its potential, And secondly, there's a risk of in trying to push the same volume of traffic through a limited corridor, we could create rat runs we don't want. So I don't want to take away anything from the work that's been done and presented here tonight. All I want to say, and I think it's important when people think about the local plan, is that the issue of the A3 and the issue of through traffic is, I think, also critically important to the getting the most out of our town. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Graham. I think the question of through traffic in the town centre, we've simply looked to displace it from where it causes real harm to the environment in the town centre. That may not be the complete answer, it may not be the smartest answer at the end of the day, but in a gap town it's very difficult to have a bypass. We could go through the area of outstanding natural beauty, but I suspect that might offend a few people. So I think we have to be realistic about what can be achieved within the town centre. I think the question of the A3 is an interesting one. I completely agree with you. The A3 needs a lot of work and not just a bit of tinkering here and there. It's had problems for a long time and nothing's been really picked up and done with it. I suppose that I should draw a little bit of comfort, and we all should, in that the Highways Agency has taken a lease of the Candle building opposite the station, because they might realise how difficult it is to navigate from the A3 to the town. This session isn't really looking to try and do that. I know the university have done a lot of work on the A3. I know Anne Milton has done a lot of work on our behalf there, and we need to keep that on as well.
Robert Birch, I'd like to understand the relationship between your vision and the current local plan process. My own view is I think the vision is fantastic. We do well to remember the journey that it took to get here, which was a very big fight with the council. I'm sure you're big friends now, but it was a struggle to get here. The current draft local plan, I think, is a huge cause for concern for many residents. They're deeply, deeply unhappy with it, and it will be interesting to understand how the two link together. Thank you.
Always nice to have an easy question from you, Rob. In terms of the local plan, in a couple of weeks' time, on Monday the 15th, I'm doing the last of the Guildford Society sessions on our response to the local plan. The local plan has within it the placeholder for the vision for the town centre. I suspect that the intention is to put as much of the Allies and Morrison response into that, and that would effectively be the answer to the question. But I don't think it's that simple. Firstly, I think what we're proposing may require some further dedications of land, and that's quite difficult to do if you haven't included them in the local plan. So I think we will be pressing for some dedications of land, and there are a number of questions that, in a sense, are not for this place, but we can pick those up on the 15th, about housing, about where the housing goes, about what our capacity is, about how we plan for that. The important thing is actually that the town centre needs fixing now. It needs fixing whether we add more people to our area or not. And in that sense, we've tried to show that it can be delivered and not be harmed by growth. But the growth question is a different one.
I just wanted to ask if you are fully aware of how bad the flooding of the River Wey can be. In the 1960s, if you look on the church wall, there's a flood mark about 6 feet up. If you think back to the late 1970s, out here the water was above the roof of the parked cars, and last winter it was the centre of the town was flooded again. So if you, with the best will in the world, build properties right on the River Wey, even if they've got a downstairs which is a garage, they're going to have terrible insurance problems and mortgage problems because of the periodic flooding of the river.
It's a critical issue, and there are ways in which, from a design point of view, one can address and design for flooding, and this is about ensuring that the height of the development in relation to the river valley is correct. And we did all the time just working with the Environment Agency to ensure that one is designing property that is outside of the immediate floodplain, and it's entirely possible to achieve that. I mean, we saw the flooding this winter, and it was really very sad to see. But we're obviously very conscious of that issue, and feel very confident that there are design solutions which can address that.
Thank you. This is probably more of a comment, because I don't think you'll be able to answer the question as it is just a vision. But I work for a large company based on Onslow Street, and I think that I've read the town centre vision, and the company even gets a mention as one of the key companies that are so important to the town. My concern is that if there is going to be this big ban on traffic and HGVs, how are businesses supposed to function if they can't receive regular deliveries from couriers and the like? I just wondered if there's a risk that these companies are going to be forced out of Guildford rather than retained.
Yeah. I think perhaps I didn't explain the plan very well. What we're doing is trying to come up with a proposal where we're at least as good as we are today. So the bridge, we are relocating traffic to provide environmental benefits, but all of the buildings have to function. They will have the same access to their car parks. They will still have access to the multi-storey car parks. There will be access for service vehicles. All of those things you have to deal with. And you just, though, take out the heavy weight of traffic from the heart of a town centre. And what is the heart of the town centre? It's from the station to the river to High Street. And it's that is that thundering traffic taken in 4 lanes, not once over the river, but twice over the river. It's just a nightmare, and that's what we've got to address.
And can I just echo John's point? There's no question that existing companies and businesses will be able to be serviced in the way that they are now, and hopefully that could be even better because there'd be less traffic congestion and so therefore more reliability in the future. And I think Guildford's so fortunate to have companies like yours.
When I arrive in a nice town, typically by train, what I'm looking for is firstly somewhere to stay the night, not too far from the station, and secondly, if I've got to go further than a walk, is where a central point where the buses go from. Will we provide that for our visitors to Guildford?
Could we scroll back to my presentation? I think, just while that slide's coming up, I think your answer is, first and foremost, yes. What we're looking at is trying to create a situation whereby the town centre is really working well, and particularly for those buses and that transition between the train and the bus which you were just talking about. Now, at the moment, if you get off the train and you're looking to catch a bus, you've got to make your way fight your way around the one-way system on foot, fight your way around to the other side of the shopping centre, and eventually you'll end up at the bus station. Once you've waited in a drab concrete environment for 20 minutes, you can leave. What we're doing instead is trying to create a really good, legible street environment. We are actually proposing a new pedestrian east-west crossing. At the moment, there's a very narrow bridge which links the station and Bedford Street. We're proposing that should be greatly augmented with a new, much bigger bridge across there, so that as you move from the station, you come out into the new station esplanade, you cross a really attractive, obvious bridge, and you have a very straightforward route which leads you to Onslow Street, which is where all the buses are, and where it's very easy and simple to navigate your way around. In terms of hotel provision, I would imagine that there'll be great opportunities to build hotels on the riverside, perhaps at Station Esplanade as well, but all within very easy walking distance of those kind of key transport nodes. You want it to be a sustainable, attractive place to arrive at. In terms of that plan, I'll just point those bits out. So you've got the station and the Esplanade here. a much improved bridge across, taking you straight through onto Onslow Street, which is where all the bus stops would be arranged, and from there you can link on into the town centre. So they're slap bang in the middle where they need to be.
Okay, very quickly, my question also related to flood control. There are two aspects of flood control. One is strategic, i.e. the amount of water coming down the way, and that's obviously controlled by the Environment Agency and bodies like the National Trust. But the way climate change is going, it looks like we're in for much more intense rainfall for longer periods. And if rain comes down at an inch an hour, it will dump on the area you show on your graph something like several thousand tonnes of water. And I'm just wondering if you can build into your plan any sort of storm drain system or any way of possibly diverting surface water which you will get under those circumstances.
The area where I live in London, there's a massive, it suffers from flooding, and currently on site in 2 parks near our house and various streets are all being dug up with underground storage facilities being provided and natural land bunds and all sorts of other flood alleviation measures. So there are definitely techniques and ways in which, and this is for a 1 in 75 year kind of, as you were saying, kind of very sudden, heavy rain and associated flooding. So there are ways in which, and the technology is changing all the time, and there are ways in which these issues can be addressed. And it's a fascinating, endless topic that we could talk about for a long time.
Please treat this question as positively intended to better understand your ideas. How do you avoid the space that you create in the town centre from transferring the traffic to largely residential roads around? And will we have a queue of traffic waiting to go over the bridge as a view down the high street?
With the plans that are proposed, how could we make sure that Guildford doesn't lose its uniqueness and doesn't become just like any other town?
Hello, yes. I just wanted to ask about footfall, because Guildford is still in competition with places like Kingston. I did design 5 figures. They could be, a mould could be made. There's a monk, a traffic warden, a labourer. They would all be life-size, and it does mean that, people would have something to celebrate when they came. It could also be adapted to villages so that they could also have figures made that represent their town or village. Perhaps pilot, if there's a Dunsfold or something, if there's a village near there.
Thank you. I went to the Solum presentation for the station, and they were indicating the plans showing the main access on the east side of the proposed development and nothing on the west. When I asked about why isn't there something to do on the west to improve transport, they said Network Rail had their own plans for the west side of the station and would not consider anything to take place there. So be warned.
Blocked, building up, ruining the site down the...
Can I just comment on the issue of uniqueness? That is a brilliant question and utterly critical, which is why hopefully in the town centre plan the focus on understanding the existing landscape that Guildford is part of, and the relationship between built development and that landscape is very key, because that provides its uniqueness, and then secondly the character and quality of the historic fabric, and then how you work with and respect both of those, and you will have your unique town. There's no question of that. The other points in terms of traffic and art and Solum are for John.
The situation with traffic in the next few decades will be what it will be. It is very difficult to predict. Countries are trying to have this modal change away from cars, but cars are still an essential part of our everyday life. We could have just taken the vision of Allies and Morrison, which is based on a modal shift away from car usage. The Vision Group didn't feel that was practical. we felt we had to have another crossing to take the traffic away. And as I said, our ambitions are that we should be no worse than we are today. Plus, we get our town centre back, we get the riverside opened up, we get the town squares we want. I can't click my fingers, sadly, and give you the answers to whether one street or other will carry more traffic or less traffic. All I would say is the only reason we are working on this project is for a net improvement to Guildford, and not a minor improvement, a major improvement. We believe that the latent potential of the town is considerable. Will there be lots of issues? Will there be lots of problems? Of course there will. Does that mean we give up? Does it mean because of all the flooding in the Thames Valley last winter, does everywhere that was flooded suddenly say they're never going to replace their kitchens, they're never going to live there again? Of course not. We have got huge issues in Guildford, being a gap town. And that's part of the reason why the council have found it very difficult to address some of these issues. And my concern is, with the growth in the population of the southeast and the spread out of London to towns like Guildford, and the growth in Guildford itself, it simply won't cope. It will get worse. So whatever happens, there's going to be challenges in existing streets with traffic. But what we've got to do is make sure that if there is real potential through master planning to have a stellar town, to use these sites, some of which have been vacant in Guildford for 20 or 30 years, to use those sites and master plan it, we should take this opportunity. Now, can I promise that in 20 years' time, when you all come back and we're all, a little bit more grey hair, can I promise you it will be perfection? Of course I can't. But is it worth the exercise? We believe it is.
It might not be a popular view, but many of those European places we showed earlier and that we all love visiting in France often have a ring road and an abundance of parking, which does make life a lot easier for people.
Susan Parker. A point of information which may be useful and a question. The point of information is that I spent a long time yesterday talking to the National Trust, I'm not sure of his title, director or whatever it is, of the Way Navigations. He's supportive, in principle, of redevelopment of the riverside, which is, I think, something that doesn't necessarily come across in the local plan. So that's, I think, something that people ought to be aware of. However, it's also important. He was a little aggrieved that nobody went to speak to him or ask him about the proposed town centre vision. And I think with some justice, not least that any crossing of the river is going to require the consent of the National Trust because they own the riverbed and it is inalienable, and they will need to be persuaded of the benefits of another bridge but may consider substitution. So that's a point of information. But broadly speaking, not opposed to development. Provided that the open spaces are all perfectly retained. The question, which is much more open, is deliverability, because obviously many of us are enormously concerned about the impact of the local plan on the surroundings of Guildford, on the Greenbelt in particular. The 5-year supply of housing is vital. How soon can some of this be delivered to have an impact on that 5-year supply?
Thank you. I think we all seem pretty unanimous about the desirability of the scheme, but can somebody please tell me about the status of it? If the Guildford Borough Council commissioned this work, does that not imply that it will be adopted? And if it is not the case, tell me please who will be against it and who will prevent it?
Yes, there's obviously a great deal of concern about the displacement of the traffic in the town, but also, I would say, outside of the town. And I wonder whether you've considered an impact assessment, and if you have, when that might be appropriate to do so, and whether people will have the opportunity to comment or consult on that if and when it's done?
Tough question, Susan. Thanks for that one. In terms of deliverability, I think some of the issues have been pointed out already, ownerships and so on. You pointed out some of them yourself in terms of getting the parties on side. To a certain extent, it's going to depend on how much the council are prepared to be sponsors of it, rather than simply helping us to get to a stage where we've designated some land. I would think that a realistic window is 6 to 10 years in terms of starting. I know that's not what you want to hear. Also in terms of house builders and take-up rates, I'm not sure that over a 5-year window it's going to deliver thousands of homes, because I'm not sure the house builders will build at that rate. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we would need to work through on that. Not a perfect answer, but we are where we are. I think in terms of the status of the work and so on, there's a certain amount of politics involved in this. Sometimes it would be desirable, no, all the time it would be desirable if we were able to bind our politicians' hands with decisions that we've made and haven't let them have a chance. But they're the ones that have been elected, and there are a few of them here, so I want to make sure that they can decide that, and only really they could answer that question. But I would urge them to get behind it and to give it the political blessing. And in terms of impact assessments, yes, there's a very real process in the planning system that requires everybody to have a say. There'll be various different stages of that from the initial vision, and I'd urge you to have your say in the consultations that close on the 22nd. Say what you think there, but there will be further opportunities in the future.
Matt Furness. I am the new lead councillor who's in charge of infrastructure and also the environment and everything else for my sins, taking on that baton. Yes, it was really just to say thank you very much for such a positive view, and really to demonstrate the fact that this is one cog in a number for transport and infrastructure in Guildford. I really do want to say, though, we do need to get the infrastructure sorted first, because that will now enable us to get a good local plan in place. And seeing this today and hearing the views, it will probably be an amalgamation of a lot of ideas that we get for going forward for the town centre and the rest of Guildford. But by having that local plan in place and the infrastructure in place first, we can then move on to really implementing these visions, which is absolutely great. So thank you.
Caroline Reeves. I'm one of the Friary and St Nicholas councillors, so obviously a lot of this comes in our ward. During the consultation period for the local plan, we've been going out and talking to our residents on a very regular basis, and I have to say that most, if not all, people are very enamoured with the vision and like to have aspirations such as this and would welcome it happening. My concern is that, for instance, with Walnut Tree Close, we have planning applications coming in at a fairly steady rate now, and although in some cases we've been able to refuse them because the Environment Agency haven't supported them, they will continue to come in, and I understand that the Solum application is due in fairly shortly. So obviously in terms of timescale, life goes on and we can't stop that. So how do we actually link the two to make sure that we can get somewhere with your vision without actually having to say there's a moratorium, because obviously then the inspector steps in and we don't really want that.
Can I just briefly answer the question about the point about infrastructure is very welcome, and which is also about phasing, which is very critical, and about delivery of public realm. If you start at the public realm and then everything else follows, that's the correct sequence. In terms of what often happens at this stage of a project, and many others have been through a similar process, is that what has been called catch and steer is a process where, in the context of an overall master plan which is agreed, where there's great clarity on what ought to happen, it is possible to then, when individual schemes, ideas, proposals come forward, to actually literally catch them and steer them in the direction of what everybody would like to achieve to maximise the benefit for the town centre in this case. So there are kind of precedents in terms of how you can introduce a process to facilitate growth and development without having to wait for 10 years. I just wanted to go back to a point Susan raised, which is that in our experience, one can actually bring forward, the point about housing development very quickly, actually. Could, on the sites that are agreed within the town centre, typically we're working on projects where from inception to delivery on the ground, you're looking as short as 3 years in some cases. So we're very keen to promote as well short-term interventions, festivals, markets, other ways of animating some of the car parks and other areas, particularly in winter, possibly the North Street site with, say, an ice rink or other measures to bring some of those underused areas into use and increase footfall and therefore prosperity.
Councillor Reid, thank you for your comments. One of the things that I think we need to make sure is that we recognise that ad hoc development will continue to take place until we actually have a plan and until that plan is in the local plan. So there are two elements of that. One is we need to actually respond to the local plan so that we've actually got a master plan for the area. And secondly, we need to make sure we've got a local plan in place so that the ad hoc development doesn't come in. When I was talking earlier on, I made the comment about master planning delivering more homes on the same land. I think that's a very important part, bearing in mind how many homes we're expected to provide. But equally, it needs to be in a great environment, not just plonked in there.
We're going to run out of time any moment. But I'm just going to take the last couple of questions. So I know.
First of all, I must say that Julian has just destroyed my greatest achievement when I was on the council. I spent 16 years, and I think my greatest achievement was to get a pedestrian crossing across Millbrook. But, however, they certainly have done superb work. But I would like to congratulate the council. It's the first time in living memory that I can recall that they've actually listened to some advice and taken it. But this has to be extended to the rest of the draft plan. This is just a tiny bit of the plan. So the thinking behind this actually has to go into the draft plan, which is in real rather a muddle. But just also to the last question about Solium. Is it possible for you to put a restriction on the height of buildings in the town centre?
Thank you. Firstly, this plan can be made real by Guildford Borough buying the sites that they don't want to grant planning consent on. Secondly, John, you've done very well so far, but you're very scathing of the Old Town Bridge. In my opinion, it's far nicer than the Friary Bridge, which is pretty horrible. So you've taken traffic away from the Friary Bridge and stuck it on the Old Town Bridge, so we now have a lovely view down the High Street of probably 100 yards of queue.
It is a very pretty bridge. What I was saying, though, is that it is not authentic. It was washed away in 1910 and then again, I think, in 1959. And it is roll steel joists with 2 bolt-on panels. The point is that if we are going to take traffic out of the town centre, there are bound to be some wins and some losses. And we would prefer to magic the traffic away, but we can't do that. It may be that that is not the solution. It is just one solution which we're asking the traffic engineers to look at. And the location of a new bridge crossing. We're only putting one. You start by coming up with one idea to test it against other ideas. And that's the stage we're at. And Guildford Vision Group, I cause any confusion here, we are not the council. We haven't got huge resources. We are residents of Guildford from a professional background related to the built environment, who have operated and done projects in other towns and just think we could do better in Guildford. If we had the resources of the council, I could have probably answered lots of the questions rather better today. But it is a huge project. It is a real challenge. But the issue is, do we want to give it a try, or do we carry on in the way we have in the last 20 to 30 years with not a bean spent on infrastructure in the town, no joined-up planning, ad hoc development, and I would hope we don't. And I really applaud the council for saying, OK, let's have a look what might be possible.
Well, after what sounded like closing remarks, I'm wary of opening the conversation back up again, seeing as it's already 9:30. But there was the point about tall buildings which was raised, which I'm very happy to touch on. I think we've started with the principles of thinking about townscape and what the town looks like from those elevated positions, and also what the views into and out of the town are. So, the key views along North Street, High Street, and other areas. And tall buildings definitely has an important consideration to play within that. I think in lots of the bigger plans that we've done, as you work through them and get into more detail, things like the King's Cross Master Plan, that has a very clear set of height parameters which planned out as part of an overall design code. And certainly it would be very possible and perhaps desirable to achieve that level of planning as part of an overall plan for the Riverside corridor and perhaps for North Street as well. But hopefully, by at least putting that first peg in the ground, making the first mark to say this is an important consideration within the vision, that at least gives the first hook to the planners to say, when applications come in, we have to be thinking about this in the very broadest setting and thinking about its impact on the city as a whole and on the key views towards the cathedral, towards the castle, and towards the river corridor. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I guess it was inevitable. But Guildford Vision Group, we're only too pleased to hear your comments, your questions, and whatever. It's very important to understand what your feelings and reactions to this are. So the website is there, the email is there. Please just feed stuff in, and we're very, very pleased to hear it. If you want to be on the mailing list for Guildford Vision Group, so you get actually mailed with all the stuff that's going on, just let us know your email address before you leave tonight. Jim, who's been taking the mic around, would be only too pleased to... There are forms? Okay, on the desk on the way out. Marvellous. Okay, so there's forms there you can fill in, and we'll keep you fully up to speed. I think, as Stephen said, John feels that he's just made his final remarks, so we're going to close. But before we do, I just want to ask you a question. Who is feeling more anxious about things than they did when they came in? Okay, who is feeling a little bit more hopeful about the future of Guildford than they did when they came in?
Oh, great.
Oh, that's queuing. Thank goodness for that. Okay, thank you very much for coming. Thank you for all your support. Thank you.